name is Morgan. I work the closing shift at a small dive bar called the Rusty Nail in the quieter part of Burlington. The place sits right off Interstate 89, but there's also a back entrance accessible from town. Nothing fancy, just a dimly lit spot where regulars know each other by name, and the jukebox has been stuck on the same rotation of classic rock for years. Most of our customers are locals, truckers passing through, and the occasional lost tourist looking for a stiff drink. I like it though. The routine is predictable, the tips surprisingly decent, and I've learned to handle all types: the talkers, the flirters, the quiet drinkers, and those who just want to be left alone. Weekends are hectic, but during weeknights, I'm expected to work alone. Not even a barback to pop in. It's easier work, sure, but I miss having co-workers around. I stay vigilant during shifts because we occasionally get bar fights with the crowds we attract. That's why I noticed him immediately. It was around 1 a.m. on a Tuesday when he walked in. If I had to guess, he was in his late 40s, extremely well groomed, not the type you'd expect in a place like this. He wore a black turtleneck under a black trench coat, well dressed but casual about it. There was an aura of sophistication that suggested money, real money, not the flashy kind. He glanced around slowly before walking swiftly to the bar and taking a seat. I remember thinking how unusually good his posture was. When I approached, he scanned the bottles behind me and ordered top shelf without hesitation. As I poured his drink, he asked if I liked working here, smiling. It seemed like a normal enough question, so I answered honestly, said yes, and smiled back, making some joke about bartending. I wish I could say I got a creepy vibe, but that's not the energy he gave off. He genuinely seemed like a decent guy, like that single dad at his kid's baseball game who high-fives the whole team. We chatted for a bit, which I didn't mind since the bar was quiet. Eventually, he asked if I ever thought about doing something bigger. Somewhat bizarre, but still not completely creepy given the situation. I gave my standard bartender smile and told him I was happy for now. He nodded and sipped his drink, seemingly disappointed. After a long pause, he asked what time I got off, out of nowhere. The question surprised me. I hadn't picked up any flirting from him, so I was disappointed to discover our conversation was just another attempt at getting my number. I smiled, gave a vague answer, and began wiping down the counter to busy myself. He didn't press. He just smiled like he already knew, drained his drink, pulled out a crisp $100 bill, placed it gently on the bar, and walked out without another word. I didn't know what to make of it. His demeanor was so unusual that I was intrigued, but I figured I'd never see him again. I was wrong. About a week later, he returned, but not alone. There was a woman with him who caught my attention immediately. She looked mid-30s and dressed in a way that didn't match her age. Trendy, but off, like someone trying too hard to blend in with a younger crowd. I watched closely as they approached. Everything about her seemed calculated, from her too easy smile to the way she leaned against the bar like we were already friends. As I set napkins in front of them, her first words weren't a hello or drink order, but a compliment. "You're so pretty." Her fingers brushed against my arm, lingering a second too long. I laughed and thanked her, but instantly knew something was off. The man didn't speak, which seemed strange, given how talkative he'd been before. They ordered drinks, and then the questions began flooding in. The woman asked how long I'd been working here, how old I was, and other apparent small talk. I gave short, polite answers, sensing this wasn't casual conversation. She was studying me. At one point, She looked at the man, and they seemed to communicate without speaking. Looking back at me, she mentioned running an exclusive event club. She leaned in, lowering her voice as if preventing others from overhearing, explaining they were always looking for young, fun people for private parties. I'd make a killing, 10 grand for a weekend. I forced a laugh and told her it sounded too good to be true. She insisted it was real, that a bunch of girls like me worked for them. Her smile never faltered, which was starting to creep me out. She circled back to the job, repeating words like fun, safe, and exclusive. Then casually, "You should step outside for a second. There's someone who can explain better." My pulse quickened. I wasn't playing along anymore and didn't bother pretending I wasn't creeped out. "I'm good," I said firmly. No smile this time. Just then, a group of customers walked in, laughing loudly. The woman's expression changed instantly, her friendly mask slipping slightly before she turned to the man. Without another word, they left. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't unsettled. These strangers had just propositioned me for God knows what. I told my co-workers and boss about it, and we agreed to keep watch should they return. My boss assured me he was always a 15-minute drive away, and that the security cameras usually deterred misbehavior. There wasn't much else I could do. They hadn't done anything illegal. I tried to forget about it. But a few nights later, after closing, I saw the car. Parked across the street, engine off, just sitting there. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, but the feeling of being watched crawled over my skin as I walked to my car, head down, keys clutched tight. When I pulled out, I checked my mirrors. The car followed. It stayed back just enough to avoid suspicion, but every turn I made, it was still there. I took a random turn onto a side street, followed. Another, still there. I started freaking out internally, but forced myself to stay calm. Without hesitating, I navigated to the police station parking lot, gripping the wheels so tightly my knuckles turned white. The second I pulled in, the car sped off. Nothing happened for a while after that, but I knew it wasn't over. I was right. During a slow weekday shift with barely anyone coming in, I was wiping down the counter around midnight, half thinking about closing early, when the door creaked open. It was the woman. I immediately texted my boss as discreetly as possible. Looking up, the woman was staring at me with that same artificial smile, walking slowly to the bar and sitting with hands folded neatly. I was about to tell her to leave when she said, "Thought I'd come check on you." My stomach twisted, but I tried to hide it. I told her we were closing and she had to leave, but she made a pouty face and asked for just one old-fashioned. I figured pouring the drink would stall her until my boss arrived, so I turned to get started, trying to keep cool. That's when I heard it, the soft, unmistakable click of the front door shutting. I whipped around. The woman was gone. A horrible feeling hit me as I moved toward the entrance. Through the glass, I saw a black van idling outside. Without thinking, I locked the door as quickly as possible, but then heard metal rattling from the back door, someone trying to get in. I grabbed the heaviest thing available, a metal shaker, and clutched it like a weapon as I dialed 911. There was no way police would arrive in time. I considered running out the front door, but hesitated. I was bracing for a fight when headlights pulled into the lot. My boss. The sounds at the back door suddenly stopped, and seconds later, the van screeched away. I hugged my boss and explained what happened. He said he'd gotten the van's license plate as it left. When police arrived, we reviewed the security footage. It was worse than I'd imagined. Before the woman left, cameras captured two masked figures crouching near the front door, waiting. Another person was at the back door, banging with his fist, clearly trying to flush me toward the front. It was horrifying. Worse yet, the plate number turned out to be unregistered. It's been quite a while since the incident, but no progress has been made. The only good news is my boss doesn't make me work alone anymore. Still, I'm extremely uneasy during night shifts and question how they knew I'd be working alone. It makes no sense. Even now, I often think about what would have happened had I given in to fear and run out the front door. I used to work the night shift at a gas station off a quiet stretch of highway near Granite Falls. I say used to because after what happened a few months ago, I won't work nights again. It's a small station that barely gets business after dark. Most of my shift was spent restocking shelves, wiping counters, and occasionally ringing up a trucker or traveler passing through. I remember it vividly. Just past 2:30 a.m., even the truckers had dried up, leaving me with nothing to do. I scrolled mindlessly on my phone, trying to kill time. At one point, I stepped outside for air, rubbing my hands against the cold. I exhaled a few times, watching my breath disappear. The parking lot was empty, just pumps, the road, and dark trees beyond. The neon sign flickered faintly in the hazy air, moisture visible even in darkness. Despite the highway nearby, it was eerily silent. As I was about to head back inside, something moved in my peripheral vision. I turned and realized someone was standing behind one of the pumps. How had I missed him? He wore a dark red hoodie with the hood up, hands shoved in pockets. There wasn't a car in sight, so he wasn't fueling up, but he wasn't heading toward the store either. He just stood there, half turned toward me, like he was watching. At first, I thought maybe he was waiting for someone, but something about his movement seemed off, shuffling in a circular pattern. I went back inside, but kept an eye on him through the glass, pretending not to. I hoped someone would drive up and pick him up, but after a few minutes, he started walking toward the door, slow at first, then suddenly pushing inside like he'd made up his mind all at once. He approached the counter but didn't speak right away, just stared like he was sizing me up. Then, in a rushed, almost rehearsed way, he muttered that his car had broken down just before the pumps. He needed a jump, or maybe just a little gas to reach the next town. I was shocked he wasn't even trying to make his story believable. I offered to call a tow truck instead. No, he said too quickly, shaking his head. He just needed a flashlight, maybe some help checking under the hood. Something was definitely off. The way he spoke, watch my reaction. It felt like a test. To be fair, people entering gas stations at that hour are usually strange, so I wondered if he genuinely needed help and was just odd or high on something. I asked where his car was parked, and he said just beyond the highway entrance. Skeptical, I nonetheless looked when he pointed at the security monitor behind me. To my surprise, there actually was a car there. I thought maybe he really did need help, until I realized I'd just been outside and would have noticed a car. Looking closer at the monitor, I saw slight movement near the car's back bumper. Someone was crouching just out of view. A cold wave of dread hit me. I forced a casual smile and agreed to help, but not before saying I needed to grab my phone from the back office. I turned slowly, not wanting to alarm him, but the second I was out of sight, I slammed the emergency panic button under the counter. The alarm screeched instantly. I expected him to attack, but what he did was more unsettling. His nervous energy vanished. No more fake urgency or shifting weight. He relaxed. His entire body language changed, and then he smiled. Not a panicked smile or embarrassed one. A slow, knowing grin, like he had all the time in the world, like this was amusing. I stood frozen. Before I could react, he turned and bolted. I ran to the monitors just in time to see both of them take off. Not toward the car, but into the woods behind the station. The car just sat there, engine off, headlights off, no one inside. By the time police arrived, nothing had changed. The car remained, but the men were gone. No footprints, no trace anywhere. Then an officer pointed out something I hadn't noticed. The front passenger door was open. There had been a third person inside the whole time. The police took my statement and the surveillance footage. A few days later, they followed up. The car had been towed and the plates run. It had been reported stolen nearly a week earlier, over 100 miles away in Oakland. No one had claimed it, no missing persons reports, no related crimes, just an abandoned vehicle with no explanation. That was months ago, and still nothing. I don't know why convenience stores are such popular targets, but I will never work another night shift again. This happened a couple of weeks ago. I worked the night shift at Walmart in Davenport. It's not the worst job, but after a while, the nights blend together. Same shelves, same routine, same dull hum of overhead lights. Hopefully something better comes along. I usually stock the electronics section, which is quieter than other areas. People don't exactly rush in at 2 a.m. for phone chargers and Bluetooth speakers. Most customers are either night owls killing time or truckers grabbing supplies before heading back on the road. That's why I noticed him. At first, I didn't think much of it. Just another guy wandering the aisles, probably waiting for someone. But after a few minutes, I realized he wasn't shopping or even pretending to. He kept appearing every time I looked up, lingering nearby, hovering in the next aisle or standing too still by the clearance section. He wasn't looking at any products. He was just watching me. I told myself I was overthinking it. The store is huge, and maybe he was just taking his time. But the way he moved, always just close enough for me to notice, never picking anything up. Something in my gut felt wrong. I was waiting for him to approach and ask for my number, but he never did. It was like he wanted me to see him, which made no sense. I went to radio someone, but the batteries were dead. I was debating whether to find a manager when I felt a hand wrap around my arm. I nearly jumped out of my skin, but before I could react, a woman's voice rang out, loud, friendly, overly familiar. "There you are," she exclaimed, launching into a spiel about how she'd been looking everywhere for me. I turned, completely thrown off, and saw a woman I'd never met. She was smiling, her grip firm on my arm like we were old friends reuniting. Before I could say anything, she leaned in and whispered urgently, "That guy's been recording you. Follow me." My stomach dropped. I glanced back. The man was still there, no longer pretending to browse, but staring directly at me. Fear crept over me as I let her pull me away. I didn't question it. The way she grabbed my arm spoke so loudly and casually like we were friends. I clung to it, grateful someone had noticed what was happening and intervened. She maintained the act as we walked, rambling about a trip or inside joke. I barely processed her words, my thoughts fixed on him. Had he really been recording me? It was creepy as hell. I wanted to know if he was following us, but couldn't turn around. The woman steered me through aisles quickly. I barely noticed where we were going, only that we were putting distance between us and that man. I expected her to drop the pretense at some point. but she kept it up. Eventually, it felt uncomfortable, so I glanced behind me. To my relief, the man was no longer following. The woman kept pulling me forward though. I told her we were good now and should find my manager, but she squeezed my arm tighter, insisting he was lurking somewhere. I thought, so what? What could he do in a store full of employees? I had been worried initially because no one was around, but now that I wasn't alone, the fear seemed unnecessary. I told her this, but she continued moving. I planted my feet and twisted my arm to loosen her grip. "You can let go now," I said, but she didn't. She smiled, but something about it seemed off. "Come on, just a little further," she said, basically tugging me at that point. I glanced around. The store was dead. We had moved past the registers, past self-checkout, past the busiest aisles. The warehouse section loomed ahead, dimly lit and nearly empty. Beyond that was the side exit, the one without cameras, the one employees used for loading shipments. That's when I realized she was leading me straight to the exit. I didn't think. I screamed for help, yanking my arm free with all my might. She lost her grip just enough for me to pull away. I didn't waste a second, turning and running toward the front of the store. As I fled, she yelled behind me, telling me to come back, followed by my name, which I hadn't given her. I kept running until I saw my co-worker Dylan, who was heading toward me, responding to my screams. I told him to call security, which he did immediately. By then, both the woman and man were long gone. Security reviewed the footage, which confirmed my worst fears. The woman and man had entered the store together. She had been with him the entire time. The man's face appeared clearly in one frame, but hers was always turned away. I had a feeling she was the mastermind, and it infuriated me that the cameras hadn't captured her face. Every second had been planned. The police got involved, and the incident was filed as a failed abduction attempt. I'm still waiting for resolution. That man should be easy to track down since his face was on camera. I have no idea how that woman knew my name. That's what terrifies me most. Those people hadn't picked me randomly. I was a targeted victim. I'll rewrite the horror stories while preserving their core elements and atmosphere. I'll change names and locations, break them into clear sections, and maintain the suspenseful tone. I once worked at a small inn in Riverdale. Our town had been hit by a severe tropical storm several months earlier, leaving many homes damaged and forcing residents to relocate temporarily. The Riverdale Lodge was a standard bed and breakfast establishment, serving the usual morning fare of runny eggs, prepackaged sausages, and assorted cereals. The inn had experienced a busy period following the storm with displaced residents needing temporary housing, but things had quieted down considerably since then, even more so than before the disaster. My shift ran from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m., after which someone would take over until late morning. I could always see our occupancy rate, which at that time was only about 9 rooms, hardly bustling. Some nights passed without me seeing a single guest. Behind the front desk was an employee lounge with a coffee maker, refrigerator, table, and a couple of comfortable chairs. The staff bathroom was also back there. During quiet nights, I spent most of my time in this room, with a service bell at the front desk for guests needing assistance. One particular night, I was in the back when I heard a deep voice from the lobby repeatedly saying hello. I went through the connecting door to the counter and saw a man standing on the other side of the protective glass partition. There was a small opening at the bottom, about 10 inches high. He said he needed towels. I grabbed a couple extra towels and slid them under the glass. He took them rather aggressively, gave me an unsettling look, then walked toward the hallway leading to the guest rooms. I remained in the lobby, sitting in the rolling chair by the security monitors, and watched him on camera as he walked down the corridor. He kept looking around strangely, then began rubbing the towels against his face. I muttered, "What on earth?" Then he entered the elevator, and I returned to the break room. About 10 minutes later, I heard the same voice coming from the lobby. I went back out to find the same man standing there again. He announced loudly that his keycard was broken. When I asked for his room number, he gave something random like 2C. Our rooms were strictly numbered with no letters. I knew he was lying. "Sir, our rooms don't have letters. Are you certain you're staying here?" I said. His reaction was nothing I could have anticipated or wished to experience. He threw the towels on the floor and began smiling, tilting his head slightly as he approached the glass. With his face nearly pressed against it, he said, "I'm going to kill you," still smiling. Then he repeated it, louder and louder until he was nearly screaming. I yelled back that I was calling the police, and I did. I picked up the phone and showed him as I dialed 911. He maintained that disturbing smile, now mocking me for calling the authorities as I spoke loudly to the dispatcher, explaining what was happening right in front of me. The disturbed man laughed and slowly walked toward the exit. I informed the dispatcher he was leaving, and when he was gone, I said he had departed. She asked if I still wanted an officer to come, but I declined. The remaining hours of my shift passed slowly. For obvious reasons, I decided to stay in the lobby rather than return to the break room. One guest checked in during this time. Around 2 a.m., my replacement arrived. I clocked out and was free to leave. Outside in the parking lot, the air was cold. I wished I'd brought my heavier coat. Walking with my hands in my light jacket pockets and my hood up, I suddenly heard a voice coming from the bushes lining the first floor windows of the inn. I couldn't make out what it said, nor did I care. I quickened my pace. Once beyond the parking lot, I briefly walked along a main road, though no cars were out in our quiet town at that hour. After a minute, I turned left down a residential street that would eventually lead to my block. The silence was absolute. No distant traffic, just the sound of my shoes hitting the pavement. Then came the sound of someone else's footsteps behind me, as if they were running on tiptoes, trying to remain quiet. When I turned around, the footsteps stopped. There was a parked car behind me, and I sensed someone hiding behind it. I heard laughter, then a familiar voice saying quietly, "I'm going to kill you." Without seeing him, I knew it was that same man. Looking around and planning my next move, I realized I couldn't outrun him, especially in my work shoes. I noticed a nearby house with an upstairs light on. Someone was awake. I decided to run and ring the doorbell for help. Glancing back toward the car, I saw the man peeking around from behind it, inching toward the front. When he reached the hood, his face and upper body became visible, revealing that repulsive, deranged smile again. I ran toward the house, screaming for help. I made it to the front door and rang the bell at least 3 times. That's when the man grabbed me and began choking me, whispering in my ear, "Die." In that moment, I thought my life was ending. Then my savior, in the form of the homeowner, opened the front door and shouted at my attacker. His grip released from my neck, and I collapsed to the ground. I never turned to watch him flee, but the homeowner helped me up and brought me inside. He gave me water and called the police, and I explained everything. They collected security footage of the man from the inn and circulated his description. Later, I was called to the police station to view a lineup of people resembling the man from the footage. I studied all 5 men for about 5 minutes, but ultimately couldn't identify any of them as my attacker. Perhaps pressure and nerves affected my judgment, but at that moment, I truly didn't recognize him. To this day, I hope I didn't make a mistake that allowed that dangerous man to remain free. I work in the professional department of a home improvement store. My closing shift partner, whom I'll call Emma, is kind but rather shy. She's quite attractive. So many contractors flirt with her. Usually it's harmless. A few compliments, maybe a dinner invitation that she politely declines. I might have asked her out myself if not for one key detail. Emma has a girlfriend, so being hit on by men daily makes her uncomfortable. When we first met, I suggested she tell these guys about her relationship status, but she insisted it wasn't their business, so she kept that information private. Emma has become my closest friend at work, and having another cashier with you prevents loneliness. We even cover each other's lunch breaks. One day, when I returned from lunch, Emma told me about a particularly unsettling customer who had been flirting with her. She'd politely turned him down, saying she was already in a relationship. Although he seemed disappointed, he did leave. I dismissed it as just another over-eager customer and laughed it off. Later that day, however, the man returned. Emma wasn't around. She had gone to help a customer find lumber, so it was just me. He appeared relatively normal, probably attractive to most women, but something about his behavior seemed off. After looking around, he asked if I could help him. "I'm here to see Emma," he stated. I asked how he knew her, and he claimed he'd visited earlier and asked her out, saying she had accepted. He said he had returned to pick her up. I lied that she had left for the day, a common excuse used to protect colleagues. His smile vanished, replaced by annoyance. He insisted on speaking with Emma and asking her out again, contradicting his earlier claim about her accepting his invitation. I told him that wasn't possible, which made him cross his arms and demand to know why. I'm not skilled at improvising excuses, but I didn't want to reveal Emma's sexual orientation if she preferred to keep it private, so I blurted out that Emma was my fiancée. His expression shifted from annoyance to confusion as he asked how someone as attractive as she could be with someone like me. I'm not a celebrity heartthrob or anything, but I don't think I'm that unappealing. I told him it didn't matter and that we were getting married in a couple of months, so he needed to back off. He gave me a murderous look, but remained silent. After an awkward pause, he left. When Emma returned, I recounted what had happened. She asked me to describe him, and after I did, she confirmed it was the same man from before. Though somewhat disturbed by the incident, she found my fiancé excuse amusing. She even joked that she'd rather be engaged to me than date him, which I took as a compliment. A couple of weeks passed, and we had practically forgotten about him. Then, one night after dark, as Emma and I were gathering trash to close the registers and head home, we heard a bang at the door that nearly made us jump out of our skin. It was him again, with a wild look in his eyes as he pressed his face against the glass. "We're closed," I informed him, but he insisted on entering. Emma shouted that she wasn't interested and told him to leave her alone. He yelled back that he wasn't there for her, he was there for me. He then declared that if he could take out her husband, she would be his. Realizing he intended to harm me, I told Emma to run to the manager's office and call the police while I kept watch. I won't deny I was terrified to remain in that small area if he managed to get inside. Though not particularly large, he might have been armed. Furthermore, company policy prohibited us from carrying self-defense items, leaving me vulnerable. The man began violently ramming the sliding doors, making them rattle so forcefully I feared they would break. Suddenly, Emma came running back around the corner wielding a 2x4, shouting that the police were on their way. Finally, the man decided to flee. The closing manager met the officers upon arrival and showed them the security camera footage. Thankfully, the man was apprehended and arrested, but neither Emma nor I felt safe working there anymore. We remain friends and attend the same university, though we now work different jobs while completing our studies. I'm grateful she was there to help me with that dangerous individual, as I hate to imagine what he might have done to me, or worse, to her. She says she's equally thankful for my presence, as having a man around tends to make predatory types less confident in their actions. It was a wake-up call for me regarding the dangers women face when an interested party refuses to accept rejection. This incident occurred just over 2 years ago, and I wanted to document it somewhere as a reminder of the lesson I learned. In 2016, I started working at a motel. Low paying, but I needed an office job. My friend Jackson got me the position. For several days, I trained with the owner in the mornings, and for 2 nights, Jackson guided me through our 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift responsibilities, which involved checking in guests and handling paperwork. The owner and his wife left for a week-long vacation shortly after my rush training. So there I was, facing my first night alone on the overnight shift. The office had a monitor displaying security camera feeds from around the property, large glass windows surrounding the workspace, and a glass entrance door. Unlike most motels, this one had no secure night window for guest interactions. Early in my shift, around 1 a.m., a man walked in asking if we had any rooms available. Typically, if someone seemed suspicious, my boss instructed me to claim we were fully booked, but this individual appeared normal initially. Without hesitation, I confirmed availability, asking if he needed just 1 room. He said yes. As I created the reservation on the computer, I noticed him swatting at the air and making spitting noises, as if surrounded by invisible insects. I tried to ignore this behavior. It wasn't my concern. My priority was completing his check-in as quickly as possible. I gave him his key, and he departed. At this point in my life, I was extremely timid and dealing with numerous personal issues, which may explain my subsequent reactions. The man returned from his room and slammed his hand against the glass door, causing me to jump in terror. Looking up, I saw him simply staring at me. He cracked the door open, poked his head through, and said, "I can't get into my room. Why won't you let me into my room?" My only response was an attempt to be helpful. "Perhaps there's something wrong with your key." "Let me give you another one," I offered. The look in his eyes was indescribable. I felt genuinely endangered. I handed him a new key, and he returned to his room. I tried texting Jackson for guidance, since he had trained me, but it was the middle of the night, and he was asleep. With no response from Jackson, I noticed the man coming back down the stairs. Panicking, I ran into the back office, locked the door, and pulled out my pocket knife, essential protection for night shifts. I heard him in the front office yelling, "Hello, hello. Why won't you let me into my room? Don't you like me?" Being foolishly brave instead of simply calling the police when I felt threatened, I decided to handle the situation myself. "I'm just on the phone." "I'll be right out," I called back. I tried phoning Jackson repeatedly for help, but received no answer. After taking a few deep breaths, I emerged from the office. The man wasn't there. He was in the bathroom. I could hear him talking angrily to himself, saying, "Kill her, kill her." My heart sank. Still irrationally avoiding calling the police, I waited. When he came out, I said, "Your key was broken. I'm sorry. Let me escort you to your room." He agreed, thankfully. Wearing a long-sleeved sweater, I was able to conceal my knife in my hand with my arms down. We walked outside, and he insisted on following behind me. We approached the staircase and climbed toward his room. I was perspiring from nervousness, continuously glancing back to ensure he wasn't making any sudden moves. He stopped at one door while I continued to his actual room a few doors down. I smiled and said, "Oh, that's the wrong room. This is your room," pointing to the correct door number. He had been attempting to enter someone else's room the entire time. After letting him into his proper room, I sprinted back to the office and locked the door. I later discovered there was a lone woman staying in the room he had tried to access. The next guest I checked in was an off-duty police officer from a neighboring community. Though I felt awkward confiding in him about the earlier incident, he seemed willing to remain vigilant. The following night, the disturbed man returned, but I kept the doors locked and told him we were fully booked. When my boss returned from vacation, I explained what had happened, but he didn't take the situation seriously. I continued working the night shift there for another year, experiencing many other strange encounters, though this remained one of the most frightening. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's stories and want more scary stories like this, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Also, if you've got your own scary experiences, I'd love to hear about them in the comments below. I'll catch you all in the next video.